Should we put everyone's names back on the record one more time?
Sure. Nicole Underwood, legal guardian ad litem for the minor children.
Ms. Tasha Thomas, counsel for the department.
Mimi Fullerton from the department.
Michael McFarland representing father. Please introduce yourself again, Mr. Ford. Christopher Ford, father.
Ready for mother.
Thank you. I understood actually that potentially Ms. Ford's attorney would be available to us again. If anybody has her information to let her know that we could still use her, that would be great.
I will.
I just texted her.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Very good. All right. Ms. Thomas, we could just conclude, I think, with your department witness.
Yes, Your Honor, I would ask Ms. Tori Sloan to be sworn in.
Ms. Who?
Tori Sloan.
Thank you.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I will. Good afternoon, Ms. Sloan.
Hi.
Thank you for being with us today. You, from the record or from the documents that the court has, you are the intensive home-based therapist for this family, correct?
Correct.
Can you briefly state what the IHT program, the framework of it?
So IHG is a it's based in multi-systemic therapy treatment, and it basically looks at a family or a juvenile delinquent with as a whole in their community. It addresses a wide range of needs, including the child's self or father's self, community, neighborhood, things like that, schools, employment. It's 60 contacts in 4 months, so that's about 3 to 4 contacts a week. I see the family, and then I'm on call 24/7 for crisis.
All right, before we go any further, I want to give Ms. Dumont a chance to introduce herself.
Hi, Your Honor. I just was able to log back in.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yep.
Your Honor, I would move that any witnesses be sequestered. There aren't going to be further witnesses.
Do you have any further witnesses after this witness, Ms. Thomas?
Maybe the parents, but I don't, and if the court needed to hear from Ms. Dillon on service or whatever, but.
Well, that's fine. She's an agency worker. She's any non-agency workers. If there are any, I don't know.
Do you have any witnesses other than the parties?
My client tends to testify, and I will call him if the agency doesn't.
Anyone else?
No.
Okay. Ms. Dumont, do you have any other witnesses anticipated today?
Your Honor, I believe Ms. Ford wanted to testify.
Very good, thank you. Ms. Underwood?
I have no additional.
Okay, I don't think we need to address the motion, Mr. McFarland.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Sloan, you stated, the 60 contacts in 4 months equates to 3 to 4 contacts per week.
Yeah.
And those contacts can be within any of those systems, correct?
Correct. So like a contact could count like an individual session, but if I called like at that point the previous worker, that would be a contact as well. So my contacts with this family are really high just because there's a high need and there's a lot of kiddos to talk about.
Yes, so have you exceeded more than 60 contacts in 4 months?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll probably, so it was ordered for 4 more months. And if that were to go, I probably exceeded that as well.
In working with the family, you heard Ms. Fullerton's testimony, correct?
Mm-hmm.
For the record, can you just?
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And in her testimony, there was information about Mr. Ford and the concerns of the children in his home.
Yeah.
I think it's probably fair to say that you are the one who has the most insight as what's happening in the home. Is that accurate?
I think so. I think there's probably things nobody knows inside the home and within the children and Chris and everybody involved. I think that this is a very complex case. But yeah, I'm in the home a lot. I work really well with Chris. I work well with the children. So I see them pretty regularly.
Do you share any of the concerns that Ms. Fullerton testified to or that were put in the court report?
Okay, so one of the main concerns that I have right now currently is the housing. I do think that that is a problem. I think that's a serious problem we have to address. I think that, in terms of the allegations that have been made, I think that the children deserve some space so that they can go to the CACs and make those reports and let an investigation happen. I think that's appropriate. And I do think that Chris and I have talked about this pretty regularly for the last couple of weeks with his therapist, Mike Mueller, who's not here. But, and so we've been prepping for this for a minute. So in terms of the removal, we've kind of had it on the radar and have planned accordingly. But yes, the housing and the financial stability, whether that's applying for Section 8 or whatever, I think that's one of my big concerns.
Do you have concerns about Mr. Ford's ability to manage children's behaviors in a safe manner?
I think that with the housing, stress of housing and lack of resources, it's hard to parent 5 high-need children, period. Those are his responsibility. He had those children, but it's incredibly hard when they have reactive behaviors to trauma and things like that. And so it's just been difficult.
The reactive behaviors to trauma.
Mhm.
That. Were you able to review the trauma assessments?
I was.
And generally speaking, do you work with the 4 children?
Yes.
And based on your observations and work with them, do you generally agree with what the trauma assessments found?
Yeah, I do. I think that the children probably disclose less than what has been like what's happened to them. I do
I'm
think.
objecting speculation, Your Honor, probably something speculation. not
Sorry,
professional
sorry.
opinion.
Well, hang on. Would you like to respond?
Your Honor, the rules of evidence don't really apply in these hearings. I think that Ms. Sloan is speaking from a place where she perhaps does have more information, which this question is starting to lay the foundation for follow-up questions on that point. I think that given her contacts with the family, it's well within a reasonable opinion of hers. And I think the court can also balance it with the weight that it needs to be given.
Any position, Ms. Dumont?
No, Your Honor, I defer to the court.
Ms. Underwood?
I would concur with Ms. Thomas that although Ms. Sloan hadn't gotten her answer out yet, she's utilizing both the experience with the family, but also what she's read in the report to make her determination, her opinion.
Yes, I mean, I would agree with that, Mr. McFarland. She has a lot of experience with this family, and I think your objection goes more to weight than admissibility. So I'm going to overrule it. Go ahead.
I think I remember the question. Yeah. I think that when I say I think that they probably didn't disclose as much, I think that they downplay their trauma to people they meet one time. Like for me, I know a lot about the family and I probably know a little bit more because I see them regularly every day. So they're more comfortable talking to me about their trauma. And I think that there were things that didn't come out, especially with BF's assessment. And so things like that, that's what I mean when I say that. But yes, I am familiar with it. I do agree with it. I think the children are incredibly traumatized, period, on a multitude of levels, but, and they have high needs, so.
As it relates to the children's trauma, it makes sense that you probably have more time to build rapport with them, obviously, with your testimony. And
I didn't hear an answer.
Yes.
And since you've started to work with them, have they continued to make additional disclosures about traumatic experiences that they've had?
Yes.
In your experience with them, do those disclosures happen sporadically, or is there typically a trigger, or?
It depends. I mean, kids say the darndest things, they say random things at times, and then other times things do trigger them and they have a memory, or they see something or hear something or see a picture, and then something pops up. But it's for the most part somewhat random, but it will, they can be triggered.
As it relates to parenting time with Miss Ford, Do you have any recommendations on that point for the children?
Yeah, so I think with the previous worker, it was kind of pushed that the visitation start, and I could understand where she was coming from with that, you know, at the light of removal and stuff like that, but we had our first visit, it went overall pretty well. You know, she was appropriate in the visitation, she was okay, and you know, I sent her a visitation summary, I sent her some resources to educate herself on trauma and things like that. But it was the following day that the two youngest boys were incredibly reactive. And had reported like some other things that they've disclosed some other allegations that I think need to be looked at. So right now, I just say like suspend for right now until we can get that sorted.
Did B and W have parenting time?
They do not.
Okay, and have they continued to express they do not want parenting time with mom?
B definitely doesn't want parenting time, period. She doesn't want anything at all. W, I think, had reported that he wanted to see how the visits were going with the two younger boys before making a decision, but as of now, no, he does not want to see her.
What about L?
She does want to see her mother.
Did she have any negative reactions or any responses to the last parenting time?
So not the last parenting time, but so when visitation was put up in the air.
I'm objecting, this is beyond the scope. The question was last parenting time, she said no to last parenting time. Now please ma'am,
Sorry, she
Now
just
she's-
hasn't had it, sorry.
now she's adding beyond what the question was, so. I asked that, she be told to answer the question and not extend her answers to something not asked.
No, early objection, she's testifying on direct examinations, not cross-examination. You're welcome to cross-examine her when you need to.
When visitation was up in the air and she was told by the previous worker she was gonna visit her mom, that was the weekend that Chris called in crisis 3 days in a row.
Were those crises involving L?
2 of them were.
And so did L have a visit with mom?
Not yet.
Some of the concern that Ms. Fullerton had in her testimony, which I think is mimicked in the court report as well, is perhaps an over reliance on IHT or the caseworker.
Mhm.
Do you have that concern as relates to Mr. Ford?
I think that when you have little resources, and he's been given quite a few, and he has access to me and Mike Mueller and everybody, you do use them. I don't necessarily think he should be punished for using those crises that weekend in specific. They were real crises. They were something like, I would be like, oh my gosh, I gotta call somebody for. And it's hard to manage, but I think right now, you know, that my contacts are incredibly high, period. So on paper, yeah, but it's a complicated case and a very complicated family.
In your opinion, do you believe that some separation, I think that's maybe how you framed it to the children, maybe, for if there's separation from dad, so there can maybe some stabilization, would that benefit the children in the long run?
I do think so, because I think that Miss Ford did a really good job when she was able to get the privilege to focus on herself and heal. She's sober 5 months. She's done everything that was asked of her. You know, she's in a house, she's stable. And I think that Chris deserves that opportunity as well, where he can get his life together so that one day his children that love him very much can come home.
Is there anything that you think the court report doesn't hit on, or anything from your experience with family that you want the court to know, or that the court would benefit from knowing?
I just think overall the case is very complex. I would say this is probably one of the hardest cases I've ever had. The children are incredibly resilient. They're smart. They're hyper aware of professionals and their parents' emotions. You know, if I stroll into the house in a mood, they pick up on that really quickly. So you kind of have to set yourself back. And same with the parents, you know, they'll pick up really quickly. That's how they've learned to survive. You know, they're wonderful children. I think that they deserve a life with their parents, healthy and sober and safe. But I think it's gonna be a long road to get there. And that is just the reality, so.
If the court orders removal of the children from Mr. Ford, can IHG continue?
No.
What would your involvement with the family then look like?
IHG would end. If they remain in the community, I hope to still see them. Get their insurance. I don't know what I'm not gonna be paid for the crisis time, but I've just said whatever at this point. But if they remain in the community, then I would see, I know BF, I would see twice a week, once for individual and once in group therapy. And those are incredibly important. Their group therapy is incredibly important to her. So that, and then crisis, on call for that foster family because she does have very high needs. If WF stays in the community, Therese Langham would take him as an individual client to work out some of those sexual behaviors. She's, you know, trained to do that. That's something she is an expert in, so that would be really good. Chris would still continue to see Mike Moeller and have access to me as needed. The two younger boys, if therapeutic visits started up again with mom, I would see mom in therapeutic visits with them eventually. And then we, after the therapeutic visit, kind of have a cool down period where we do some just like lighthearted play stuff, just to cool them down. And then LF would be seeing Mike Moeller and probably another Parkside therapist, Leah Bachman. She was just hired, so she's worked with them before, but we could accommodate that. I think IHG is beneficial to them, but we're just gonna keep an intensive schedule even if it ends.
Thank you for that. I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, any questions, Ms. Dumont?
Yes, Your Honor. You had testified that Ms. Four has acted appropriately before her parenting time and during her parenting time. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the therapeutic visits.
Okay. And how many times a week is she able to see the two youngest children?
So in this reporting period, she's only seen them once. We started last week. So just one time she sees them for 1 hour.
Okay, and she was drug screened before that as well, correct?
Correct.
And there's no issues with any of that?
No, she was sober and, you know, it was emotional for sure, but she was sober.
Okay,
And
so she's had one parenting time with each of the youngest children, and you're recommending now to suspend that completely?
not forever. I think just until if they move to remove, just until they get stabilized in a foster placement, and then they can be reevaluated at that time. But, you know, Christian had a lot of behaviors in school the next day. And like I said, CF, the youngest child, he had a lot of behaviors in school. He ran out of the school building into traffic. He was just throwing desks. Like, he had a hard time with it, and he had a hard time in the session. I think HF, the second oldest boy, he did good. He did well, but it was CF that had some problems, and it was even emotional when mom went to go. So just until they are stabilized where they're at in the placements that they will be in, I think that would be appropriate.
But you testified as well that these children have high needs, and you know, behavioral issues. So I guess I'm not sure how you can necessarily equate his outburst a day later after his parenting time with his mother to her in any way.
There are high needs in terms of like, you have to be very trauma informed when you work with them or talk with them. And Christian does have behavior problems in schools, but he's never ran out of the building. And just from the way that the visit went, he was very emotional and it took him a long time to regulate him after the visit. And honestly, I didn't even want to send him back to school that day. So the day before, after the visit, I didn't even want to send him back to the school that day. But there was just no childcare in place. So it just was hard.
But at this point, you're just speculating and with regards to the outburst.
An informed opinion.
Okay. And again, Ms. Four hasn't done anything that's concerning on her end to have any parenting time suspended. Is that correct?
Well, the children also reported after the therapeutic visit, some concerns about what they saw with mom. And that was another reason for the visitation to be suspended until those can be properly investigated. HF had made the comment that his balloon, like his good thing for the day was he got to see his mother, and the brick was he remembered that she sold her oldest daughter to a married man. So that's what they said. That's what he said. That's what he reported. So I think that coupled with the next day with their behaviors in school, it just, until they're stabilized, it's gonna be better just to hold off. But I'm not saying that's the truth or not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's what they reported. And similarly with what they report about dad, I think that needs to be investigated as well. So.
Okay. And then who are you reporting that information to investigate?
Child Protective Services and DHS.
Okay.
And maybe law enforcement if it warrants it.
Okay. But then you are still agreeable that therapeutic parenting time at some point should continue?
Yes, I do. I think the children love their mother. I think the two youngest boys for sure love their mom. And they love their dad as well. But I think we're gonna, just until everything's sorted out and these kids are stabilized, it just makes sense to hold off.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. McFarland,
Nothing, Your Honor?
Ms. Underwood,
Ms. Sloan, what would parenting time look like for dad with the children if they were removed from his care?
Similar to the situation with Miss Four, for a period of time be suspended, let dad get on his feet, get some stuff going, let them be able to disclose if there's anything they want to disclose or feel the need to disclose. And then eventually therapeutic visitation with dad and the family as a whole would be really, really good, because you're not going to be able to heal from that trauma away forever. You know, you kind of have to address the elephant in the room at some point. So I think that therapeutic visitation, whether that's through Parkside or somebody else, be very appropriate.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
any redirect, Ms. Thomas?
Ms. Sloan, I know that I think you're trying to protect the children and what they've shared with you. But I also wonder if it would be appropriate to share with the court what the children have said, so the court understands the gravity of what these children have endured.
Okay, so, is that okay if I do that?
Would it be appropriate if we took it off live stream to do this?
Please, please.
Any objections?
Nope,
No.
we concur.